22. If money meant nothing to Presley during his first years as a millionaire, by 1974 it was treated with more contempt than ever. At one stage during 1974 and 1975, he bought and owned no less than 5 airplanes. Not even Howard Hughes or Aristotle Onassis had 5 personal planes. He bought a Jet Commander, a Falcon, a Jetstar, a Gulfstream, and the granddaddy of them all, a Convair 880. The West Boys and Dave Hebler don't pretend to know how much it all costs. There are accountants right now who probably still don't. Presley made no attempt to use the planes in any business-like manner. He could have leased them when he wasn't using them and at least got some of his investment back. But there were times when he actually paid to lease another plane because it was more convenient. At one stage he was amused by a news report that singer John Denver had given his manager, Jerry Weintraub, a Rolls-Royce that reputedly cost $40,000. Presley laughed and said, "I'll show that son of a bitch. I'm going to give my manager $1 million airplane." The $1 million plane was the Gulfstream. Colonel Tom Parker, in his infinite wisdom, refused the gift. Dave Hebler cracks that Dick Robb, one of the faithful bodyguards who had once been a U.S. Air Force pilot in Korea, could have flown cover for the flotilla of planes. At one stage there were 5 pilots on his payroll. It was, says Red West, very similar to Elvis's earlier buying binges. You know, he started off buying that horse for Priscilla and ended up buying a farm with trucks, horses and trailers for everyone. He bought 1 plane, then went overboard and bought 5 of them. Old Elvis never did things by half measures. Sonny remembers that when Presley got into the plane buying spree, he was commuting between Memphis and Dallas, where the planes were purchased, as if he were going down to the local pizza parlor. He was particularly bent on trying to impress Priscilla, even after their break up with his acquisition of planes. He was very proud, and rightly so, of his Convair, and flew Priscilla into Dallas for a personal inspection of the plane, says Sonny. He seemed very anxious to have Priscilla use the plane any time she wanted it. It was almost as if he was saying to her, "Look what you left. Here's a man who has his own airliner." The bizarre pattern of Presley's behavior seemed doubly erratic after the 1973 divorce from Priscilla. Dave Hebler remembers a day in 1975 when Presley suddenly slapped him on the back and said, "I'm going to buy you and Joe Esposito a Maserati each." Dave and Joe flatly refused the offer. As it turned out, there were no Maseratis in Memphis, but Presley was in a gift-giving mood. So he piled into a car and headed down to Schilling Motors in Memphis, where he proceeded to buy no less than 9 Lincoln Mark IVs. It was madness, says Dave. He bought cars for all of us, but it got crazier the next day. It appears that Presley found out that the salesman should have offered him a discount by virtue of the mass purchase. He got it in his head that the salesman had screwed him, says Dave, so he called us all together and told us that we were going to take the cars back. He didn't want to take the cars from us. He just wanted to take them back and buy Cadillacs instead. Well, as it worked out, we took back 7 of them. Can you imagine the salesman's reaction when we all drove up in 7 Lincolns with mileage on the clock and said, "Take them back?" The guy almost had a heart attack. Well, it was resolved and we ended up going to another Lincoln dealer, and he also bought some Cadillacs that day, although I can't remember how many. What I do remember, however, was this black couple were at the Cadillac dealers, Madison Cadillac, it was. Anyway, he sees this lady looking at a Cadillac Seville and he strikes up a conversation with her and idly asks, "Do you like that car?" She replied, "Oh, yes, it's very nice." Presley said, "Fine, pick one out. I'm going to buy one for you." The lady looked like she was going to faint, but she did pick one out and he did buy it for her. When the story hit the wire services, an announcer in Vail, Colorado, reported the story. He signed off the report with a one-liner, "Elvis, if you're listening, I could use a car myself." Presley got red to call the announcer and then he got on the telephone. "What color do you like?" Presley asked casually. Predictably, the announcer thought it was one of his friends putting him on. "Aw, come on, who is this?" "No, I'm serious. This is Elvis Presley. I want to buy you a car." The next day the announcer was driving a new Cadillac, paid for by Presley. A lot of people think he does those things for publicity, but he doesn't, says Red. When he gives, he really gives. It's a genuine gift and he doesn't announce it. Sonny and Red remember that Presley read a story about a black woman in Memphis who was badly crippled. Completely unannounced, he bought her the most expensive wheelchair available. "Man," says Sonny, "that woman's face was a picture when he just walked into this old rundown house and he got us to unload this expensive wheelchair. It was a beautiful gesture and Elvis was very capable of doing those things. And yet, he would turn around and spoil it all by some thoughtless gesture. Zero Becca his gift Giving usually ran to cars or jewelry, but he is also a very generous giver of cash to the various Catholic, Protestant and Jewish charities in Memphis, which, says Red, is something I could never work out. Elvis would often tell us that Catholics were the demon referred to in the closing section of the Bible, and although he hired Jews and had many Jewish friends, he was convinced that Jews were out to take over the world. Marty Lacker, who worked for him, was Jewish, and Elvis would always say, "Well, Marty is one of the good Jews," but deep down Elvis is very prejudiced and he made no secret about it in his talks to us. One person whom he was intent on giving a gift to was none other than Vice President Spiro Agnew. Sonny recalls, the Vice President was staying in Palm Springs when Elvis was there. Anyway, he set up a meeting with him. We all went to the house he was staying at and Elvis had bought a gold inlaid .357 Magnum revolver. It cost about $2,000. Anyway, he goes into the house to present the gun to him and stayed talking to him for about half an hour. Curiously, in the light of other events, Vice President Agnew demurred on the gift of the gun, saying that as an elected official, he could not accept a gift. When Agnew was forced from office, Sonny recalls telling Presley that Mr. Agnew could now accept the gift. Presley replied, "No, screw him. He got caught as a crook." Presley is particularly generous to his female friends. The West Boys estimate that Presley has given girlfriend Linda Thompson over $250,000 in jewelry alone. Presley met Linda in 1972. Soon after his break up with Priscilla, a friend of Presley's, George Klein, a former Memphis disc jockey, introduced them. Linda impressed the boys as extremely religious when they first met her. She would never curse or use bad language, says Sonny. I remember that instead of cursing she used to substitute the word hello, which we all thought was kind of cute. It took a heck of a lot of work for Elvis to get her to move in with him. She just didn't think it was right, but she finally gave in. The West Boys remember, however, that Linda was not shy about receiving gifts from Presley. I would say, comments Sonny, that she has more dresses and clothes than Elizabeth Taylor. Whenever she travels she has many suitcases with her. She must be one of the country's best dressed women. Man, I have known her to go into Giorgio's in Los Angeles and buy a dozen dresses, and that is one very expensive store. Also in Las Vegas, she would shop at Susie Cream Cheese and buy a dress in every color. Her jewelry is something else again. Elvis has given her at least $250,000 in jewelry, and that is a modest estimate. He has also bought her family a house in Memphis and he has got her a beautiful apartment in Los Angeles. Linda appears to have a particularly tolerant attitude toward Presley, according to the West Boys and Dave Hebler. The average girl couldn't take Elvis's lifestyle, says Red, particularly now when he stays in his room for a week and 2 weeks at a time without coming out. Linda doesn't seem to mind. That kind of life didn't appeal to Priscilla, but Linda seems to take it in her stride. She also has a tolerance for other women in Presley's life. In 1974, Presley was introduced by Joe Esposito to Sheila Ryan, an incredibly pretty girl from Chicago who is now married to James Caan. He often would alternate taking them on tour with him, Sonny recalls. One time he would take Linda, then the next time he would take Sheila. If ever Linda made a fuss about him alternating her with another girl, I would always hear Elvis tell her over the telephone, "Woman, take that knife out of my damn back." I really think Linda wants to get married to Elvis and you can't blame her for wanting marriage. But I don't think Elvis will ever make the step. When Presley was dating a beauty queen from Georgia, Dave Hebler recalls that a photographer went to shoot a picture of him sitting with his new girlfriend in the back seat of his car. The driver started to drive off, thinking that Presley didn't want a picture taken of him with a new girl. But Presley told him, "Let him take the picture. I don't mind if they use it. Linda thinks she is married to me." While still dating Linda, the boys remember that Presley introduced Sheila Ryan to a Las Vegas audience as his girlfriend and asked her to show off her new diamond ring. That was not all. In the audience was his ex-wife, Priscilla. It was weird, Red recounts. He had Priscilla and Sheila sitting in a booth next to one another. Presley introduced Sheila as his new girlfriend, then introduced Priscilla and added, "We get along fine. There is no trouble." Then he turned to the band and said, "But Mike Stone ain't got no balls. Mike Stone ain't got no balls. Mike Stone is a stud. My 99 ass." Dave Hebler was incredulous. There were people in the audience who heard it. It was a wild thing to say, but Elvis couldn't help make the crack. Of course, Mike Stone is one hell of a good-looking guy and Elvis knows it. But saying that, my jaw dropped open. Poor Priscilla and Sheila seemed very embarrassed, but they both handled it with lots of class. Priscilla said at the time that she should have known better than attend the show. God, it was embarrassing. Mike Stone became an obsession with Presley, understandable, perhaps, under the circumstances. Red calls with a laugh, We made damn sure that the television show The Streets of San Francisco was never on when Elvis was around. Carl Malden plays the part of Mike Stone, a detective, and I promise you, Elvis was very likely to blow a television set out with his gun if it had come on the screen. There was an incident on stage in Las Vegas, says Sonny. It was the night of the 18th of February. Elvis was half through his act at the International Hotel and suddenly this guy from a group sitting down front jumps up on the stage. He had this coat draped over his arm and we didn't know what was going on. We thought it could have been a gun inside. Anyway, he comes running toward Elvis on stage from the left side. Red grabs him in a headlock and drags him off to the security guards. Meanwhile, one of the guy's friends leaps up on the stage. J.D. Sumner sort of tapped him on the shoulder and told him to sit down. This guy draws back his fist to hit J.D. and then we all get up there on the stage and it's like a big brawl. One guy goes smashing back from the stage into a table and there is glasses and stuff breaking. Anyway, we got the place cleared of the guys. Elvis, meanwhile, is leaping around the stage kicking the air with karate kicks. He didn't touch anyone. He was just kicking the air. It all calms down and Elvis tells the audience that he should have broken their goddamn necks. The audience cheered and it was over. But after the show, Elvis got us and said that the guys who caused the trouble had been sent by Mike Stone to break up his act. The man who drew back his fist to hit J.D. Sumner had tape across his fist. And Elvis was convinced that he was a karate expert sent by Mike. And that's when he asked us to hit Mike Stone. He was absolutely convinced that Mike was planning to do him in, which was ridiculous. Frankly, I don't think Mike gave Elvis a second thought. 99. The West Boys and Dave Hebler saw a steady decline in Presley, both physically and emotionally, over the past 3 years. He had severe problems with a twisted colon, and his weight seemed to go up and down like a yo. He lost all interest in the physical aspects of karate. The boys remember that when they would work out at it, Presley would go through the initial meditation called for during a proper karate workout and then lose interest and sit around eating and watching the others work out. Despite his ballooning weight and a double chin, Presley is still convinced of his good looks. He believes, says Sonny, that he has a face like King David. He is quite vain, although he doesn't look after himself. When he goes on stage, he often wears one of those elastic, tight girdles to keep his stomach in. He wears lifts in his shoes to make him look taller. He even wears lifts in his slippers around the house. Once again, the problem is simply boredom. Presley has nothing to interest him. Regrettably, the one chow lang that the boys believe could have changed Presley's life was not taken. Sonny recalls that in 1975 Barbra Streisand and her boyfriend, John Peters, visited Presley in his dressing room in Las Vegas. She came in and congratulated him on his show, says Sonny. They talked at length, and in the course of the conversation, Miss Streisand announced that she was producing the remake of A Star is Born, which she eventually starred in with Chris Christopherson. Miss Streisand's original choice, however, was Presley. She wanted him to play the part, said Red, and I tell you what, it was a damn tragedy that he didn't, because Elvis would have been great in the part of the washed-up superstar who gives his career to his girlfriend. Now they were very serious about the offer. I remember they both were joking about each other's way. Elvis was very keen to do it. You could see the interest in his face. It was going to be a real challenge. How it broke down, I believe, was because the money wasn't right. I believe that the Colonel wanted $1 million and Streisand wanted him to go on a percentage deal. Front anyway, it fell through, which was a damn shame. I think the Colonel said after, "We don't need Streisand." And then Elvis started talking himself out of wanting to do it. You know, he said that it wouldn't have been his picture, that it would have been all Barbara's picture. After the discussion with Miss Streisand, Presley must have been concerned about his appearance, because he got cosmetic surgery. He had it done at the Mid-South Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, said Sonny. He had it done in 1975 because I got the bill. He went into the hospital under my name and it came up on my Blue Cross Blue Shield card. The hospital pointed out that Blue Cross does not cover cosmetic surgery. After he had it done, he brought me into his room and asked if I noticed any difference. Actually, I didn't until he told me. He had his eyes done and there is a thin little scar around his ears where he had his face tightened. You can hardly notice it. After he got it done, he tried to talk me into having it done, but I wasn't interested. Presley's behavior seemed to reach a peak of unpredictability in 1975. I remember, says Dave, in Las Vegas that just the tiniest incident would set him off. One time a guy took a picture of him in a gun shop in Las Vegas. Sheila Ryan was with us at the time. We asked the photographer not to take a shot with him holding a gun. Anyway, the guy got a bit aggressive but we forgot about it. Elvis, when he got back to the hotel, he screamed and yelled like a madman about one guy backing down all us karate experts. I remember Sheila ran from her room with her hands to her head crying. Dave remembers that in Tahoe at one hotel Presley had bombed himself with so many pills that he couldn't walk. It was scary, says Dave, because he was on the roof and we were trying to get him to get some sun. But, man, he almost tumbled off the roof. He was so far out of it, he almost fell over the side. I had to carry him away. When the brother of a police friend died in Denver, Presley flew in to sing at the funeral service. He also paid for a colossal floral tribute. He then attended the funeral dressed in a police captain's uniform with specially tailored flared pants. He also wore the police captain's uniform to a recording session in Memphis. The boys remember that by January 1976, Presley seemed to be having more and more flashes of uncontrollable temper. Sonny relates, "He took us to Vail, Colorado, for what he said was going to be a dream vacation. Well, it was a nightmare. He was heavy into pills. On January 8th, it was his birthday. We drove up to Vail in a bus and we congratulated him on his 41st birthday that night. Well, Linda got a cake, but we were staying in another condominium, so we didn't know she was going to present it to him. Well, she did, and he called a big meeting complaining about none of the bodyguards being there. He was like a spoiled kid." Then Dave Hebler was involved in an argument with another member of the group who accused the bodyguards of not doing their jobs. Dave argued back that the security was the tightest part of the whole Presley organization. Presley flared at Dave, "I'm not going to have any more of this bullying bullshit. It's going to stop or someone is going to die." It really got black, says Red. He was flashing at everyone. He had a lot of stuff in him. It reached a dramatic climax when Presley decided to move into a condominium occupied by Jerry Schilling. Presley decided at 3 in the morning he wanted to move out of his quarters and into Jerry Schilling's. He woke Schilling up and ordered him to move. Schilling protested that a move could wait until the morning. Presley recruited Red to go over to the Schilling quarters. Schilling was angry and made it abundantly clear to Presley. "The next thing," says Red, "he tells me to beat up Jerry. I managed to cool that kind of talk down. Well, I thought I did. Then I see him putting a bullet into a gun and cocking it. It was getting very hairy." Elvis really wasn't himself. During the same trip, Dave recalls that Susan Ford, the daughter of President Ford, was in Vail. Her girlfriend was going to throw a party for her and wanted to get Elvis along as a surprise. The security guys came over and tried to organize, but Elvis wouldn't do it. He said he would be quite willing to meet her. She came to his chalet, but he wouldn't go to a party. He was trying to make it like he was more important than the president's daughter. More and more, say the West boys, Presley seemed to lose interest in everything about him. He would only talk about his jewelry, cars, and wardrobe, says Sonny. He didn't seem to have any other conversation. Other stars would come backstage and all he could talk about was his possessions. He wasn't interested in other performers. In fact, he didn't like other performers. He would always have something catty to say about them. If they came to his dressing room to see him, he would keep them waiting for an hour on end before he would make his entrance. Red continues, "I remember Jimmy Dean, a nice guy, was waiting for him one night. Elvis came out of his bedroom after keeping Jimmy out there for an hour. Jimmy greeted Elvis with a big hello and said jokingly, 'I'm out to rip a yard from your ass, keeping me waiting.' And Elvis whipped out his .22 revolver and stuck it under Jimmy's chin and said, 'And I ought to blow your head off for talking to me like that.' Jimmy smiled and laughed it off, but he was embarrassed by Elvis doing that." The boys report that Presley does not like to be around other performers unless he is in charge. "We used to see a lot of Tom Jones in Las Vegas and he was a real gentleman," says Sonny. "We would go to his shows and Elvis always would say something to knock him. Tom wears very tight pants and Elvis would always say, 'He sticks a damn sock down his pants.' He would comment on Tom singing, and during a performance, when he was in the audience, he would sing the songs along with Tom, making out that he could sing the high notes, which he couldn't. Unless he is the center of attention," says Sonny, "he just isn't interested. His ego is just out of control and it's a pity because he wasn't like that way back. It hurts to see someone you love change so very much." Epilogue. It was the morning of July 13th, 1976, and Sonny West was at his dentist's office in Memphis. Red West was at the office of a private investigator discussing a lawsuit that had been brought against Presley. Dave Hebler was at the pool of the Travel Lodge near the Memphis airport. "Judy, my wife, called me," says Sonny, "and told me that Vernon Presley had called the Travel Lodge and wanted to talk to me about an important matter. I called Mr. Presley from the dentist's office. He was at Graceland. He said that he would like to see me in person. I told him I was a grown man and could handle anything he could tell me on the telephone." Vernon Presley's voice lowered and he said, "Well, things haven't been going too well, and, well, we're going to have to cut back on expenses and we're going to have to let some people go." 99 Sonny felt a chill creep into his body. "Oh, I see," and I guess I'm one of the ones that is going to be 99 let go. Vernon Presley said, yes, I'm afraid so. There will be others, too, unfortunately. Sonny asked who they were, but Vernon declined to answer, adding that he would prefer to tell them himself. In a daze, Sonny drove back to the hotel and watched morosely out of his hotel room as his young son Brian and his beautiful wife played outside by the pool. He wondered how he was going to break the news to her. Sonny called Dave and told him the news. Dave answered that he had been summoned to see Vernon Presley also. It looked like he was going to get the chop too, which materialized about an hour later. Red called Sonny's room soon after. His voice was flat. I've been fired, man. That completed the firing of Sonny, Red and Dave. Vernon Presley told all of them it was for economic reasons, but the boys believed the execution came as a whim of Elvis Presley's. But what pissed us off, said Red, after all those years I had been with him, he never took the time to tell me himself. He just cut out and left it to his father to do. It was cold, man. It was not so much the loss of the job that hurt the boys. It was, says Sonny, that we believed Elvis loved us, really loved us. We knew he behaved pretty wildly and we knew he could have a bad temper, but we believed that underneath it all, he loved us and we loved him and we were part of the family. That's what hurts. Red West had been offered fortunes in the past to write a book about Presley but had always declined. Even when we had our blow-ups, I would never have considered it. We were like brothers, man. But in the end, it just worked out that we meant nothing to him. Dave Hebler, when he got over the shock of being fired, said he was relieved. At last I could get on with my own life and not have it tied to the whims and moods of another human. But frankly, the worst part of it all was telling my mother, Willie. She, like many other mothers, believed that Elvis was God, fearing and a Christian, a wonderful non-drinking, non-smoking person. She's the one who will get a shock out of reading this, and for that I'm sorry. All three, despite their obvious bitterness about the firing and their realization that Presley felt nothing for them, pray and hope that Presley will read the book and come to a realization that his life is leading him on a path to disaster. He will read, Sonny says, and he will get hopping mad at us because he knows that every word is the truth and we will take a lie detector test to prove it. But just maybe it will do some good, if he can realize what he is doing to himself. Under the circumstances, it would have been near impossible for a man like Presley, given his background, to come through life without his stabilities being threatened. Dirt. Poor kids don't grow up in a tiny shack town and become millionaires before they are 20. One every day of the week. Presley was a classic case of too much too soon. Red feels that if his mother had lived, it would have brought a direction to Presley's life that he seems so badly to miss. Had he stayed married to Priscilla, the same thing might have happened. Presley, one of the world's most glamorous males, today is a very lonely man. It's kind of sad, says Red. All that money, all the homes and all the comfort, and yet Elvis doesn't know if he has a friend in the world. He doesn't know if the people who hang around him are there because of the money or because of him. I loved him, but now he hasn't got me. 3 months after the firing, a man called the boys asking if they would put off writing the book about Presley. The boys refused. The next day, Red called Graceland and spoke to Charlie Hodge, who told him that Presley was screwed up. At 7 the next morning, a slurry voiced Presley called Red West at his motel in Hollywood. The conversation went like this. Presley, how you doing, man? Red, I just woke up. Presley, I was just on one of those singing binges. I got a couple of new guitars and singing my ass off. Watching little kids marvel. I'm by myself. Linda is in LA, she's changing apartments. We had that apartment. The people found I was in back of it and raised the rent double. She got another one right down the street. Charlie Hodge told me about the talk you all had. I guess I do owe an explanation. Red, I wish you had come to me and told me. Presley, you don't do things like that cause that's my daddy's business. Red, no, it's not. Presley, I was getting a lot of excess pressure, you know that racquetball thing? A business you went into. 2 courts for $1,300,000. My understanding was that we were going to just use my name. And that's all, and that was the contract I signed. I did it as a favor for Dr. Nick Nicopolis, and Joe Esposito. I'm just trying to tell some of the things that led up to it. I was wrong about Hebler. Just a bad thing on my part. He was very undermining and sneaky. He hated all you guys and everybody else, and I kept hearing this shit. It just burned into my ear. And those goddamn lawsuits. You know how them lawyers are. There were 6 lawsuits in 2 years. I don't know whether you heard it, but they were trying to prove us insane. I'm talking about some influential people who were checking psychiatrist reports. They were trying to prove us insane, the whole bunch. Red, I could not believe it. You had left town. Your daddy called us and talked about cutting down exponents and giving us 1 week's notice. They give Chinese coolies 2 weeks. Presley, I didn't know anything about it. The 1 week thing. Red. The bottom fell out. I got a little hurt at first. Presley, well, I can see that. You know my damn voice is so low. I make J.D. Sumner sound like a tenor. My damn fingers are blistered. I'm not operating on but one cylinder. Well, you know what happened was a combination of a whole lot of things that piled up on me. It was like a fuse burning, and maybe I did lose sight of a whole lot of things. Especially you, your family and everything. Red. It was cold, man. Presley, I love Pat, Red's wife. You got a good family and everything. Red. Maybe sometimes I overprotected you. You have problems. Presley, well, you know what it is. It's like that old guy said in Cool Hand Luke, a failure to communicate. Red. We sure didn't communicate in the last year or so. Presley, like I said, it was just a series of things. If I could lay them out to you one by one, I could show you the reasons of the separatisms. My daddy was sick, nearly dead. My family is strung all over the face of the United States. It's the goddamn lawyers and lawsuits making a mountain out of the molehill. Red. We had some rough times. Everyone was after our ass. Presley, that's what I mean. One gets away with it or thinks they do. What they try to do is establish a pattern of insanity and violence, like me shooting out that lamp up there. Red. Where was that? Presley, up in the Hilton Hotel with a .22 target pistol. Red. Well, we're known as the Wild Bunch. Presley, yeah. The good old days are still a fact. Red. But the fun left. Presley, the fun ceased to exist. I couldn't pinpoint it. I couldn't pin it down. Goddamn racquetball courts. 2 courts for $500,000 each. Red. That's too much. Presley, what the fuck? Man, poor old Joe had his mother hawk her house to get the money. That's what he had to do. Well, I pulled out of it. It started off kinda innocent. I was told one thing. Like I wouldn't have to put up a dime. Wouldn't be any money or nothing. Well, that was the contract I signed. I talked to Daddy about it just after he came out of the hospital. We talked over a period of time. If it will help Joe and Nick, they could use my name because I couldn't benefit nothing from it. I talked to my attorneys yesterday about the racquetball. What would happen is that we would be out and they would start hitting me for 10,000, 1,000. Well, I thought, are you guys putting up that kind of money? They came on tour pretending being interested in numerology books. It all falls into place now. It amounted that they wanted $80,000. I said for what? They said for a secretary. Red. Goddamn, those secretaries, they got a union or something? Presley, I said how in the hell is a secretary going to cost $80,000? I didn't want to crush their dreams. I tried to hang on in there with them. You know, they had all these cards and shit printed up. Chairman of the board. It started off Presley Center Courts and they changed it to Elvis Presley Center Courts without even asking me. Red. But old Red was doing his job. Presley, I wasn't using that as an example. I was just telling you. What started out as a friendship and favor and they turned it into $1,300,000 project. Do you realize how long it would take to realize a profit? These contractors are cold-blooded businessmen. I'm in the process of getting out of it. You know I don't even care that much for racquetball. Red. I guess all that pressure led up to our demise. It was a shock. We were broke. I sold my house. Hated to do that. Presley, you sold your house. Red. Oh, yeah, I sold my house. Hated to do that. It was a bad time by all. Presley, well, I guess there never is any really good times. It was bad for me, too. I hadn't been out of the hospital long enough to start rolling. My daddy, I almost lost him. He's my daddy, regardless of anything. Red. I understand. But if I had just heard from it would have been easier to take. Presley, well, in doing business and things of that nature, I don't do that. And way Red. You mean about firing us and everything? Presley, yeah, I had to go to Palm Springs, analyze goddamn racquetball courts. I'm still seeing little fuzzy balls, but Charlie was saying, Charlie talked to you and you thought I was on the line. I was over at Daddy's house going through these figures. If I wanted to hear something, I wouldn't do that. I would go another way. Red. You know how paranoid everybody gets. Presley, oh, sure, like looking over your shoulder and not knowing who the hell it is regardless of what. How's Pat and the kids and things? You. Red. Just hanging on until I get something going. Presley, I was very disillusioned about Hebler. He faked me off something terrible. Red. What did he do? Presley, he would say little things to me, who he hated. Ed Parker told me, keep him at arm's length. This went on over a period of 2 years. Red. I don't know what you're talking about. Presley, it's hard to explain. I don't think he liked anybody in this group. I think I'd become a dollar sign to him. In the process he lost sight of Elvis. That can easily happen. It happened. Man, I'd become an object, Not a person. I'm not that sign. I'm not that image. I'm myself. You're so wrong on one thing, and don't get paranoid. I'm talking to you as a friend on a private line, and there is no soul here. I'm not fucked up by no means. On the contrary, I've never been in better condition in my life. Red, you had been pretty fucked up. That's what I was talking about. Presley, well, I went through a divorce, you know. You were there. That wedding thing. Referring to Red's complaint that he was not invited to his wedding to Priscilla, I had nothing to do with that. That was railroaded through. I didn't even know who was there in that little old room the size of a bathroom with a Supreme Court justice. It was in there over and done so quick I didn't realize I was married. I could see it back then, but that wasn't my doing. I had nothing to do with, you know. All of a sudden I was getting married. When you go through that, you keep your mind on one thing. Red, let's get to the last couple. 3 years. Let's face it, you haven't enjoyed yourself. Presley, I enjoy my work. Red, I know that. But what about the rest of the time? Presley, we had a pretty good time in Vail. Red, we had a ball in Vail. Presley, I know I did. Red, we were always worried about you. We were worried about you. Taking a few things. Presley, you worried about me so much that you turned around and tried to hurt me. You see, I know what that is. Red, well, that's after you hurt me. You hurt me and my family very bad. You left us out in the cold, so let's not talk about me hurting you. Presley, things went on that you didn't know about. Red, all I know I was left out in the cold. Presley, all I know there was friction created in the group. The vibes were so bad, people were scared to move and everything. So who knows what the hell they were hearing and being told. I just know it got to be very, very tense. A situation where it could have been fun and a relaxed type thing, something went wrong. And then on top of the racquetball thing and everything else and all the personal things, it was a fact we did have to cut down on expenses. Red, you gotta do what you have to do. You could. I have cut down someone else. I thought I was important to the organization, and I'm glad I found out that I wasn't. I still got a little life left. I'm going to enjoy it. Presley, oh, yeah. It's just an unfortunate situation. It's just now that it's started to get back on its feet. My daddy has lost down to 100. I think he's back up to 165 pounds. 178 now. That just shocked and scared me to death. Because you know how I feel, cause you know how you felt about your daddy. Suspicion was cast on this group. I couldn't figure out the source though. Just like that song we did. We can't go on together, with suspicious minds. Maybe I did act abruptly, first one to admit it, without thinking. You know, Sonny was never around. I got nothing against Sonny. Hebler tried to bully his way through everything with scare tactics with some of these young guys. They would ask questions like, and they never could get a straight answer. They were turned down at every corner. I just felt I should talk to you and let you see my side of it. Red, I appreciate that. That's what I wish we had done at the very first. Maybe I could have understood it a little better. What's done is done. I wish you all the luck and I hope you stay right where you are for 40 more years. Presley, I'm working on it. Red, you got to get healthy. Elvis, you haven't been healthy for a while. Presley, oh, yes, I am. I just had an absolute physical, head to toe, in the last 3 weeks. One of those things that is required by Lloyd's of London. That thing I had, that lower intestinal blockage corrected itself. I went on a weird liquid diet. That big intestine down there has to have bulk. Went on a diet, 20 days of diet, and I heard that it was turns out that large intestine had nothing to work with, so as a result it stopped. Another mistake. Working. I keep hearing that shit about being fat and middle-aged. Red, no, you ate a lot. But you weren't fat. You could tell there was something else wrong. Something was wrong inside. When I tried to talk to you about it, you'd get mad. You wouldn't listen. We were worried about it. Presley, you know, I thought I told you all it was the lower intestine. I supposed to undergo surgery and take part of it out. That was psyching me out because I didn't know what it was. Red, well, I'm glad it's all straightened out. I really am. Presley, it's been straightened out a long time. It's just a failure to communicate. What we have is a failure to communicate. Like that song Roy Hamilton did. Understanding solves all problems. Red, we didn't have much understanding there. Presley, I don't know whether it was you and I as much as it was coming from someone else. No, negative vibes. You Red, I'm not into the psychic thing. Presley, I'm not either. But I do know we are constantly sending and receiving. All the time. I could feel the negative things but I couldn't exactly pinpoint what it was. I just reached a boiling point. Hoped that you would understand it. It was a temporary thing. That was what it was. I didn't feel I could communicate with anybody. I felt terribly alone. You know, like that number 8. The thing that says they're intensely alone at heart. For this reason they feel that they feel lonely, but in reality they have warm hearts toward the oppressed. But they hide their feelings in life but do what they please. Well, I'm a number 8 person and so are you. Red, it's been lonely, man. I can tell you. Presley, well, I can see it. Maybe I was absent and listening too fast. It bugged me when you were talking to Charlie and said I was all fucked up. I'm not. I got a daughter and a life. What profiteth a man if he gains the world and loses his own soul? I love to sing since I was 2 years old. We were sitting here playing the guitar and singing some songs. Love is a many splendid thing, and me and Charlie talked about that harmony part. Missing that harmony part. Red, well, what can I say? I miss singing it. Presley, well, look, you take care of yourself and your family, and if you need me for anything, I would be more than happy to help out. Red, appreciate it. Presley, I mean it. I don't give a goddamn, and that ain't got a goddamn thing to do with articles or no publications or none of that shit that I've heard. I've just heard rumors, bits and pieces. I don't know nothing. I was on tour and thing. I have never sat down with anybody and had it laid out to me. I just know that you as a person, and Pat, if there is anything I can do, any way of getting a job, anything else, let me know. I'm still here, son. Red, I appreciate that, and I will tell Pat what you said because she was hurt and the kids were hurt. Presley, all of us were hurt. It's like that song Decidedi Rata. Listen to the dull and the ignorant because they too have a story to tell. And then Hank Williams wrote, you never walked in that man's shoes and saw things through his eyes. After analyzing the blamed thing, I can see it. I can see it clearly. That's why I saying, anything I can do at all. Worried about the book? I don't think so, not on my part. You do whatever you have to do. I just want you and Pat to know I'm still here.